We're going to do a recording. Welcome in, everyone. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, for those of you who are live, welcome. I thought we would just sort of momentarily check out old mate Scott's video on this, because I have a few opinions on this myself, talking about how Dead by Daylight is made to be miserable. I have some strong opinions about this, some opinions that are probably unique to really the OCE region of Dead by Daylight when it comes down to it. But yeah, anyways, let us see, shall we?
Hey guys, Scott here. The whole point of this video is to prove how Dead by Daylight is a game designed to make people as miserable as possible. When I say that, I don't really mean that like the developers sat around a conference table smoking cigars and like, all right, let's just make people as miserable as possible. Like, this is not an intentional thing. To me, it's sort of like Behavior Interactive, the developers. They like designed a t-shirt and they wanted the t-shirt to be extremely comfortable, so they made it like cotton. But then someone goes to a campfire and then a spark flies onto the shirt, it catches on fire. Like, the developers did not intend for it to be incredibly flammable. They really had good intentions with it. They wanted it to be comfy. They wanted it to be, you know, a good thing. But shit's still on fire, so it doesn't change the fact of where we're at with the game. I just wanted to be clear, I don't think this is something they ever, like, intentionally did. It's just a side effect of the way the game has been balanced and designed over the past 10 years. So there are three main tenets to this, and they all kind of build up to a central point that I want to get to. The first of these main tenets is,
with 20 bet, it's all play, no delay. Start hot with a welcome bonus. $350 plus 170 free spins. 20 bets where late night spins turn into early morning wins.
Can you not?
Big games, chill vibes, real rewards. 20 bet. Find us on the web.
the map design. Map design has been one of Dead by Daylight's biggest issues since the game came out. In fact, like almost 6 years ago, I made...
Map design, okay. When it comes to map design, holy shit, there are some issues. You can go for entire games on end, right? Where you've got unfavorable maps for your killer and the build that you're bringing. Like a very good example of this would be Billy and indoor maps. Fucking impossible. You could have a blight, just really any movement-based killer that isn't really nurse or spirit or any sort of, you know, more chasey-esque killer. Essentially a killer that has conditions to their movement, shall we say. There's so many problems with the map balancing in Dead by Daylight.
Made this video saying it's the biggest problem in the game, and I pretty much still stand by that, and I think most people actually would stand by that as well. Map design in Dead by Daylight is a large cause of so many of the frustrations in this game. There are so many variances in terms of balance with regards to maps in this game that the game itself becomes basically impossible to balance. Now, the developers have actually gone on record saying that they want certain maps to favor certain sides. They're okay with a particular map being very killer-sided, and they're okay with a map being very survivor-sided, vice versa, and everything in between. They've said that because they want the underdog experience. They like the idea that a bad player can...
That is literally the dumbest thing I think I've ever heard. Okay. So, let me get this straight. So you first, because here's the problem that I have with that, right? You decide that you want your maps to be unfriendly to one side. Okay, fair enough. You know what? That's your prerogative, your game. You can make however you want. And then you decide to introduce an esports scene. Or at least attempt to. Everyone knows how that went down. Why? like, it's like you have two brain cells behavior, but they're both, like, ravenously fighting each other. It's insane.
beat a good player if the stars align and they get a map that's really good for them and everything works out for them. They want that to be the case. That's intentional. I don't have a clip of this anymore because it happened in a live stream of theirs that I don't even think it's available anymore, like 4 years ago, but they will without a doubt said that, and many people in the community can attest to that. So that is something they've gone on record as saying, and that is nice for the underdog story. I can agree. It does feel good when you beat someone that you know you shouldn't have. When you're playing a weak killer and you beat a really strong 4-man team, that feels great. When you escape against a really top-tier killer and you know you shouldn't have, that feels great. The obvious downside to this is it doesn't account for the other side, which is people being robbed because they just got a bad map. That is not only more common, but it's also more memorable due to negativity bias. People
Negativity bias is such a huge thing in Dead by Daylight. It's not even funny. I would argue that Dead by Daylight has the largest, like, conglomerate, if you will, of negativity bias of almost any game. In fact, I'd say any game. Reason being is because you end up in this vicious cycle no matter what you're playing, whether you're survivor or killer, where you just don't know how hard you actually have to try in each match, and it gets really rough sometimes. Like, really fucking rough. So
remember negative things far more than they remember positive things. So you're not really going to remember the one time you got a good map that you won on because you got that map. You're going to remember the 9 times you got a completely shitty map that your killer can't do anything on, for example, and that's going to make you just miserable. It's going to just drain all of the fun from the game. That is the thing that you remember the most. So again, while their intentions are noble,
I'm going to be practicing Nurse Cob. Like, I'm going to be going at it again. But I'm just, because I'm eating, I'm just watching this video. One of my viewers last night, because I ended up playing Nurse for like until like 5 in the morning. I'll be honest. Like, you got off, Charlie got off about 30 minutes after you, and I just played Nurse until like 5 o'clock in the morning. It was rough. And then one of the viewers who happened to pop by my channel was like, you should watch this video and tell us what you think. So that's what I'm doing.
it really ends up having the reverse effect where people are upset more often than they're happy because nobody likes the feeling of being robbed. In fact, I would summarize this entire map section as nobody is ever happy losing due to like things outside of their control.
Losing to think, okay, I have some gripes with this because there are certain times where if I'm losing to things out of my control, it can actually help make me feel better. But generally, he's right. Like, losing to things that are just beyond your control is so shit. Like, how do I put this? I was playing a game against a survivor squad last night, and this survivor squad bought all the flashlights they could, all the, you know, essentially everything they could to beat me, and I was tryharding on Nurse because I have only just really started learning her. They couldn't do anything, and like, it's because of the setup that they had preordained to bring. Like, they brought perks that had to do with like healing, for example. And while that's okay against Nurse, it's not going to help them win. And then we also got a map that was heavily favored towards me, that being the Coal Tower. That was a very, very clean map. And like, here's the thing, if they had bought the correct setup and the correct perks and actually gotten a good map, they probably would have won, but it's beyond their control. Because honestly, like, they were the better team in that game. I just won because I was playing Nurse, and I was playing really to win. And, you know, like, at the moment, I can't differentiate between how hard I'm supposed to be trying versus how not hard, if you will.
That always feels bad in everything, in every game, in just life in general. Losing due to things you can't control feels absolutely terrible, and it should be a mission of every game dev to minimize that as much as humanly possible. Obviously,
Agreed.
that's not the case in Dead by Daylight. Dead by Daylight kind of thrives on that. Now, when you have this insane level of disparity, the game is basically impossible to balance. How can you have a killer on one map have 10 pallets and another map has 20 pallets, for example? How can you balance the game uniformly when there's such disparity here? It's impossible. You can't do it. And in fact, when they try to do it, it ends up making the game terrible. For example, right now, recently, they just did a quality of life patch where they added a bunch of pallets on a bunch of maps. Ideally, this was to make killers like the Krassu, who just came out and were very, very strong, a bit weaker, but then it has the side effect of making all that the bottom tier.
That is the stupidest fucking... It's the stupidest fucking thing. The stupidest fucking thing. Having a band-aid patch like that where you're placing like an enormous amount of resources on the map for survivors specifically to stop one killer is such a shit fucking patch. Yeah, exactly. Like the band-aid, bro, you're just nerfing already kill, like, fucking, bro, they have indirectly nerfed the pig again. They've somehow done it. We're here. We've managed to nerf the pig again. Completely indirectly, of course, but we have managed to do it. Like, it's fucking insane, man. Exactly. It's so shit. Like, seriously, and it's not the only problem with, like, Dead by Daylight as a whole when it comes to this whole Band-Aid topic. They release perks every fucking, like, release that have Band-Aid properties. And it's so shit. Like fucking, you remember when boons came out? Like, boon totems, and then because everyone was complaining about the boon totems, they released that one fucking perk where if you cleanse a boon totem, you as a killer can rebuild it. And then, you know, it like fucking turns into a big fucking perk or whatever it's called. I can't remember what it's called. But, bro, this is the way I think they should do it, right? Every killer should be allocated a certain amount of points to each trial, and the trial should spawn a trial based on the amount of points that that killer or that survivor group has. So, like, for example, Nurse would have 10 points because she's a really strong killer, so the map would be, like, adjusted accordingly to match that level of difficulty for the survivors, right? Pig would have like 3 because she's fucking weak as shit, and also depend on the map, of course. It'd be a lot of work, but that's the way I would go about it. But it would, again, it would be a lot of work, which is just something I don't think the devs at Behavior are willing to put into their game. It would just be a hidden value system that you could change and tinker with each update, depending on how the community's feeling about that. If a certain killer feels fucking impossible to work with, then you can just change it.
Killers just like unplayably bad. And so whenever you try to do uniform changes like this in a game that has so much disparity with its maps, it's always going to fail. You can't do that because it's always going to punish someone. Someone is always going to suffer for it. If you make maps weaker, for example, and you make it so the weaker killers are now stronger because of that, all you do is make it so the stronger killers are just even stronger now. And now the survivors are upset. Like I'm saying, when the game has so much disparity between maps and the balancing, you know, in between them, you cannot balance it. It's impossible. even just aside from balance, there are just maps that rob you of the ability to like play the game. Indoor maps are notorious for this. If you are playing a killer, I don't know, half the killers in the game at this point that require like a direct line of sight to a survivor to do something, and you get a map like Larry's, which is a very congested indoor map that basically only benefits like stealth killers, you just don't really get to use your power. This is not even an issue of like balance, it's just you're just bored. If you pick the hillbilly who can sprint really fast in straight lines and stuff like that, and then you get Hawkins, you can't do anything. You're just going to hit people with your hammer the whole game, and you're just going to be bored. On the flip side, if you pick a stealth killer that would benefit from those indoor maps, and you get a super wide open map like Ormond, for example, again, how are you going to sneak up to people as Myers on a big white snow map with open fields? You don't really get a chance to play your killers. And again, this is not even really a discussion of balance. This is just, this sucks. Like, I'm not happy playing the game right now, which is arguably more important than the balancing itself. You can have a really, really fun, not balanced game. So that is definitely something that's possible. But a lot of the times I just load into a map, and within 1 second, I'm already either bored or frustrated, or know I'm going to lose, or know I'm not going to be able to do anything, whether you're killer or survivor. You shouldn't ever load into a match, and the first thing you feel is dread. Next of the main tenets of this whole video is perk balance. Now you might think perk balance is not as big of an issue because with the maps you can't really choose where you go. The game just decides that for you and you're just stuck with whatever you get. There are some map offerings, but they've been heavily nerfed to where you can't really guarantee maps anymore. So for the most part, you don't really have control over the map that you go to. Perks, on the other hand, you do have a lot more control over, so it's not as big of an issue. While that is true, it's not as big of an issue. It's still an absolutely massive issue to the game.
I think, hear me out on this, I think that the term perk choice is a fucking joke. I think, being honest, like, if you are playing Dead by Daylight, realistically, you only have, like, 15 perks to choose between if you want to win. Because, and it's not necessarily either side's fault. Example, right? I was playing Killer last night, okay? I went against a survivor team that was playing as fucking hard as they could. They were max distancing, flashlight saving, all of this stuff. They were playing as hard as they could. Fair enough, right? The problem is that now that that's the expected bar, that's the bar of expectation, I now go into the next match with that same expectation that the next Survivor squad is going to be just as intense, as altruistic, like, just everything, right? Like, throwing themselves at me non-stop in order to get a win over me. The problem then is I teleport as Nurse as fast as I can directly onto the survivors, and they are sitting there playing fucking tambourines. Like, what the fuck is this? And the problem is, I'm still riled up from my previous game, so I don't take any chances because I don't know what they're doing. So I just swing, and now suddenly I'm toxic because, you know, like, I'm interrupting their little jamboree. Like, it's just, it's so rough, and it entirely depends on what they bring. To be honest, I think there is a huge way you would be able to fix something like this, and I have been considering it for ages. I reckon, right, that the survivors should be told what killer they're going against. Not the map, not the offerings that the killer's bringing. The killer should just always be known at the very start of the match. I don't think there's any reason not to, because that way the survivors know how seriously to take the game. Like, if they end up going against a fucking Michael Myers, there's no need to take that anywhere near as seriously as fucking Nurse or Blight or Spirit, right? It's like, just, in my mind, telling the survivors what the killer's going to be at the start of the match is just like more fun, for example.
Because perks basically exist to band-aid problems with Dead by Daylight. That's just simply how they've done it. Perks are just things that you can equip on your killer or survivor that bestow various effects, and Dead by Daylight has a lot of problems, and they don't ever really try to fix the problems themselves. They try to normally throw perks on top of that so you can equip things that fix these issues. Let me just give you a perfect example of the insane disparity between perks. Let me give you an example of someone being tunneled off the hook. If you're unaware what that phrase means, tunneling off the hook is when someone has been put on a hook because they were downed by the killer, and to be tunneled off the hook is as soon as that person gets unhooked, the killer beams right back to them and immediately tries to down them again. Now, there are a couple of built-in protections for this, but they don't last very long, and let's give a perfect example. Let's say someone has a healing build. They have a bunch of healing perks on. They can heal people really fast, and that's what they brought. Not even a meme build. It's not a joke build. It's a very strong build. It just doesn't have anything to do with getting tunneled. So you get hooked, then some survivor unhooks you, then the killer immediately decides to tunnel you. What's going to happen is the killer is going to wait 10 seconds because you have 10 seconds of basically invulnerability off a hook. After that 10 seconds, he's just going to smack you. You're going to go down. He's going to pick you up and put you back on the hook. You're now one step closer to dying. You didn't really get to do anything. That's that. So that feels terrible. Now let's go over someone that didn't have a healing build. They have a specifically anti-tunnel build. So what happens is the killer will wait 10 seconds and he goes to hit. Except you had off the record. So now the killer actually doesn't down you. Off the record gives you basically 40 seconds of protection off the hook now. So now you get hit, you get a speed burst, you get to go further. Killer's got to catch back up, get another hit. Killer finally catches up, out mind games you, whatever, downs you, then picks you up. Except, nope, you have Decisive Strike. Decisive Strike is a perk that allows you to stun the killer when they pick you up if you've been recently hooked. So now you are stunned, killer drops you, and they're just going to have to chase you again. So then you get another 20 seconds of distance or 15 seconds of distance or what have you, depends on the map. And the killer finally catches up, and now they down you, or they try to down you, they swing at you, except now you have the perk Dead Hard, which activates after you've been unhooked, and when you press a button, you get a brief invulnerability window, basically. So the killer hits you during that, and yet again, you've been hit a third time, and you get another speed burst, and the killer's got to chase you again. This process takes like an additional minute because you clicked 3 buttons. That is the insane disparity here. That is now suddenly a game-winning decision from the killer, is now a game-losing decision from the killer because of a particular build that a survivor decided to put on.
Mm-hmm.
The disparity between situations here leads to so many frustrations in the community. And here's the issue. Everyone is both right and wrong at the same time. That's why there's so many...
I would just like to say, because a lot of... And keep in mind, people who are watching this on YouTube, both me and Cobb in the chat play a shit ton of Survivor. Alright, if anything, we're Survivor mains. I'm just starting to get back into Killer. Cobb's played a bit of Killer himself. But we play a lot of Survivor. We've played a lot of Survivor over the years. Survivor perks are far, far stronger than Killer perks could ever hope to be. Killer perks slow the objective. Survivor perks just straight up stop the objective. Again, like Dead Hard, amongst other things, like... Exactly. But it's by necessity that killer perks are weaker. But like, that balance is so hard to pull that I don't even blame behavior. Starting off in an asymmetrical genre is already rough. Trying to balance 300 perks is rougher, so...
much arguing in this community because someone, like the second guy that's got the anti-tunnel build, might go, tunneling's not an issue. Just equip these perks. The killer will throw the game if they try to do it. But the first guy that had nothing of the sort, no defenses, might think tunneling is way too strong. And they would both be correct.
You know how we fix this problem? You do what I do. You don't run any fucking perks at all. You know, that's the funniest fucking thing, Cobb. What do? They should do a PDB. Actually listen to people that give feedback. They have a consultation program, and they don't fucking use it. They literally have a consultation program where they can talk to people like Otts, Scott, Hins. They can talk to all of these people, fucking Tofu. and they don't use it. There is a consultation program. They have this, and they apparently they just don't use it. But yeah, don't look. Here's the thing. Bob will tell you this. I'll tell you this. I never run perks, and honestly, the reason why I started not running perks in the first place was because Survivor in OCE is extremely weird, to say the least. Your matches vary wildly when it comes to OCE. No killer is really the same skill level, and so you're just going really high skill level killer, low level skill killer, bouncing all around the show, in between everywhere. The goofiest killers to the most serious killers, right? And really, like, eventually I was so sick of bringing builds that favored, survivors too much that I stopped bringing perks. And while that inadvertently probably seems like it's me flexing, and while it kind of is, it's also helped me learn quite a lot about how to play the game. And the reason why is because when you have a perk like, say, your Lithe, your Dead Hard, your Sprint Burst, you purposely end up putting yourselves in situations where those perks are going to be most favorable to you. So, like, for example, if you're using Lithe, you are going to be running loops as much as possible to get the use out of your Lithe. The problem is, as soon as you start using certain perks and certain add-ons, you become blind to all the other opportunities that you might have to get away from the killer or to do something with the killer. Now, when it comes down to it, that percentage of chance of you being able to pull something different that is more beneficial than you using your perk is probably only like 5%, right? But you learn to look for these things more often by not running perks. When you run these perks, you just are in that single mind of, I need to get to this window, vault it, use my Lithe to get to this window, loop that sort of thing, Obviously, the way I play is a lot harder, but in turn, it's made me a much better player than I otherwise would be. And really, I can use any exhaustion perk or any perk that has a function of distracting the killer, playing around the killer, running away from the killer, because I am more versed in what to look out for than I would say the average player would be. The whole of DBD. The new killer is far too strong with a very little counterplay behavior. Okay, thank you for this feedback. Here is a very minimal nerf to the killer. It should solve all the problems. Oh yeah, and by the way, also from behavior. Take this perk. You will need it on your journey. It's just perk. If Kresu hits you, you get to just ignore the hit for the first time, but afterwards you're getting hit. Actually, no. You ignore the hit initially. It does damage over time, though. You now have a health bar.
It depends entirely on the build that they brought. And this applies to most aspects of DBD in general. You can have someone that thinks slugging is way too strong, except some guy's got Unbreakable or Boon Exponential or one of the other 10 perks.
That actually would be a really interesting thing, though, Cobb. Give survivors health bars, and then different killers do different amounts of damage. That would be impossible to fucking balance. Yeah, been the crust counter perk, exactly. That would be a really interesting thing, giving individual survivors different amounts of health and stats. And then, like, it would be fucking rough to balance, but that could be interesting. I would actually kind of like to see that.
Conviction that involves getting slugged, or we're gonna live forever, or made for this, or there's so many perks that deal with slugging, and if people have those perks...
I think you could also actually, realistically, right, you could probably balance perks around that better than you can with how it is now. Because it's a finer imprint or metric of, let's say a survivor has a 300 total health, right? Like they have 3 health states as they do in Dead by Daylight. Instead of 3 things you have to work with, you have 300 individual points. And killers could choose to allocate stats to attack or speed or, you know, like, I don't know. It would be very interesting. I think there would almost certainly be a stale meta that would eventually emerge because people would just find the best thing for every situation. But for the first few weeks, that would be a very interesting wee game to play.
Slugging, no longer an issue. If you don't have those perks, it can be really strong. And again, people are going to argue with each other.
I actually had that thought. Sorry, Scott. Yeah, meta's always going to be a thing. Like, you can't blame the players for like, optimizing the game. Like, I can't remember what dev said it, but it's rung in my head for years, and it's so true. It rings so true. And it's, given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of your game. And that is so real. Like, I mean, for example, Elden Ring, right? I have a near max level account. You know what I spent most of that time doing to max level that account? I sat at Mogwin Palace with the in-game weapon and used the art over and over and over again on the hill with all of the Albinorics. The most boring shit, and I did it for like fucking hours, like hundreds of hours. Yeah. Shit on people with hardware. Exactly. We need a better PC, Cobb. Fucking, I can't believe he said that. That's actually diabolical. That's what I was going to say. I would like, okay, hear me out, Cobb. I would like, right, a Elden Ring style game. Because I figured out how, you know how me and you always talk about like over leveling in FromSoft games and problems with discovering weapons that you really shouldn't have, like, or be able to get your hands on quite yet, but some people do. I think the way they solve that is by making the leveling system in Elden Ring, change it from a stones. You know how you use your stones in order to like level up weapons? You have your smithing stones, stuff like that. Instead of having smithing stones, oh god, ate too fast. Instead of having smithing stones, you do it on a time-based thing. So the amount of time spent using a weapon would in turn make your character more proficient with said weapon and make it do more damage. This would not affect speedrunners, because speedrunners would just have to learn to use the weapon more efficiently, and it would not affect the wider audience because they can literally still essentially do the exact same thing where they run around killing things for levels. I don't know. For me, I just would like to see that a FromSoft-esque game where the leveling system revolves around the actions that you take rather than you allocating points into a thing. It would make the game longer, but I mean, in my mind, that's good. Like, for example, let's say you have a character that's really proficient at broadswords, right? But then you put on a whip and you're essentially like level 0 again. Like, except you might have proficiency in like armor, or for example. Yeah, exactly. And I think it would just help balance stuff like that out. I was having a thought about that the other day. It would definitely turn a few people off, because a lot of people like the whole allocation thing, because, you know, it makes builds easier to do and stuff like that. But I really think it would be fun. Like, and I mean, obviously, the biggest talking point of it would be every time you go to a boss or up to a boss and fight it and die, the longer you fight that boss for, the more leveled up your weapon's going to be, and eventually you will just beat it by sheer force. Like, because you'll be so proficient, you'll eventually just fucking 3-shot it. But it would take a long time. I just think that's a good, like, way to do it.
It's too strong, it's not strong enough, it does nothing. And they're both correct at the same time, because you can't account for the insane disparity between the builds and the things that they allow you to do. That's the main problem here. These are issues that have to be addressed by base kit features, and they recently attempted this. They just went way overboard in a lot of scenarios, but I'm hoping they stick with that and refine it to be something that you don't need builds for, because when you have scenarios like this where things can be so miserable for any given side, unless you bring the perks to counter them, suddenly there aren't 200 perks in this game. There's like 15, because you don't really have the freedom to choose whatever you want. You gotta choose the meta, or you're just gonna get left behind and get completely screwed over. So that just results in build.
Again, like, in OCE, I feel like this is a bit different. Now, when it comes to Dead by Daylight, the rest of the world, I don't know. But in OCE, like, the amount of, like, really serious kind of survivor players you run into is so few and far between. Like, people will run meta-esque builds, like, they will... They run meta perks with unmeta perks. Like for example, Cobb in chat will run a I don't know, sprint burst, for example. But then he'll also run Pebble or Red Herring, right? Like, he will run... This is the kind of expectation that OCE has. And to be honest, I don't know if it's the same anywhere else. People who are from those parts of the world, please let me know. But it's a lot different from what I've seen compared to, like, Europe and stuff. Pebble is the best. Okay, buddy. Right.
The monotony, seeing the same things over and over again, which leads to boredom, which leads to people being miserable. It's all connected. These are all just interconnected webs of butterfly effects that lead to the ultimate end goal of I'm bored. Now, the final tenet of this whole discussion is the matchmaking. Dead by Daylight's matchmaking is legendary for how
matchmaking, in my opinion, is the single biggest problem that Dead by Daylight has currently, and I don't think it's close. I said this before, I'll say it again. I went in as nurse, fully fucking revved up from my last game because the survivors were trying as hard as they could to beat me. So I took that exact same energy into the next match. I got 5 kills with 5 gens remaining. Like, and it wasn't even... Like, the problem becomes, if you have such a overpowering presence as killer at the very start of the match before they've even gotten, like, a generator done, the survivors just give up and start throwing themselves at you. Because they're like, well, what's the fucking point? Like, and to be fair, there's no reason why they shouldn't, like, think like that. Because I've just come in here fucking enraged. Like, oh, excuse me. Fucking, I've gotten the fucking enraged buff from fucking Risk of Rain, or what is it called? Fucking Slay the Spire. The fucking enraged buff that red fucking, like, mini boss has. And I'm coming in here, like, swinging with intent to kill. And the problem is they just don't match that energy, so they just give up, you know? Like, and I mean, I don't blame them, you know?
Absurdly terrible it is. It's the kind of matchmaking where you can have one game with people that are nearly impossible to beat, and another game right after where they have no idea what they're doing. And there's just no way to understand what you're going to get. And that's because the way that this system determines skill is absolutely terrible.
Matchmaking is a problem because it relies on all the previous statements. What do you mean by that one, Cobb? Do you mean like previous games?
For survivors, it's counted as a win if you simply escape the match. Nothing else matters.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning, if you ran the killer for 45 minutes while your team did 7,000 generators, but then you die at the end because of that, you're worse than your teammates, whose MMR goes up and yours goes down. The game does not account for action.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I think that's... There was, when I was first learning Nurse yesterday, there was a guy playing Steve Harrington who I ran into for quite a few matches. And like out of the, like, I want to say maybe 30 total matches I played yesterday, I probably ran into him about 15 or 16 times. And he could run me for ages. Like, if he wanted to, he would be able to run me for the entire match, no problem. And there was nothing I could do about it. So I ignored him and went after his friends, like, you know, any good killer should, because, you know, you want to actually get some kills. And his friends were fucking awful. And he said to me in the after-game chats, he's like, can you please just chase me for one game? And so I gave him one game. I got stomped. Like, there was no chance I was catching him. And then next game rolls around, get him again. And I went after his friends, stomped all of them, and then eventually got him just by virtue of the fact that, you know, there's no one left doing gens anymore, and he's just running me for circles. So, but it, like, yeah, it was rough. And it's this sort of Survivor matchmaking that becomes a problem, because within the same match, you can have the disparity of two different matches. You know, so I was talking about me being on Nurse, having a really hard match and then going into an easy match. You can have a hard and easy match in the same fucking match. Like, you can have 2 or 3 people that are just completely fucking hopeless and literally just run in a straight line, and you can get them 20 seconds each time, every time, right? Or even sooner if you're good enough, right? But then coupled with that, you could also have 2 people or 2 or 1 person who is just an absolute fucking goat, and they can just read your every move. And now suddenly you've got to play differently depending on who you're chasing for the game to remain entertaining. Like, do I instant down this Fang Min and send her off to the fucking, you know, to the depths, if you will, before, you know, really fucking tryharding on this guy who I know can just absolutely destroy me? Or do I just kind of let her run around and do gens while this guy absolutely destroys me? There's no two ways about it.
Actual skill on the
And
Survivor
it's rough.
side. On the killer side, it's a bit more fair, because typically if you're killing everybody, you're probably doing a good job. But for Survivor, there are so many variables that go into it that to have a system that is so vague and only goes off of one metric, you're going to have a scenario where even if people have the exact same MMR, their skill levels can wildly differ. So the system, even if it worked perfectly, would still be flawed because the values that people are being rated on are completely inaccurate. So even if the systems match people with the exact MMR together, it would still have insane disparity from match to match. Now, it doesn't do that though. It actually has a soft cap, which basically means once you get to that level of MMR, you match with anybody at or above that level forever. So if you have 1800 MMR, you can go against people with 83 trillion MMR.
Yeah, this is another point. And this was also, so when MMR first came out, it was eventually data mined, I believe, and found that essentially if you had played a decent amount of Dead by Daylight, you were already at max MMR. Like, just by default, you could play a game, 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, and on the first day, most people were already max MMR. And then as some people started to lose more and more because they kept getting matched, everyone was pushed backwards, and that's just kind of how it went. But then it caused other problems where, like, some people's matches, I believe it was Dowsy, his matches took, like, hours to find a game, even, so.
It's the same according to the matchmaking. And again, there's a wide disparity there on top of that too. Now, they did that because they kind of had to. When they first introduced MMR, there was a time, a very short time,
yeah, 2+ hours for Dowsy to find a match last night. This here is, like, it's unacceptable because, okay, here's what it comes down to, right? You can imagine the ranked system like a pyramid, right? At the top of the pyramid are your pros, And these guys should take, realistically, the longest time to find a match because they literally only have a certain, very small amount of people that they can choose from. This rings true for all games. This rings true for Rocket League, where, you know, I mean, even in Grand Champion, you can spend upwards of half an hour looking for a match if you're high enough in the GC levels, especially in OCE. In the pro scene, it's worse. In Overwatch, towards the end of Overwatch's sort of competitive circuit, Flats was waiting in queue for comp something or other. I can't remember what it was. He was waiting for 14 hours for a match. 14 fucking hours. And then if we go over to here, Dowsy is not a comp player. Dowsy's very good at the game, but he's not a comp player. And Dowsy should not be waiting 2 hours to find a match.
Actually, the system worked pretty well, and it accurately put people of the exact same MMRs together, except people were waiting an hour for a game. Content creators couldn't play the game anymore. Like, we actually just had to stop playing DBD because you had to wait an hour for a match to find an actually accurate team to your skill level. And because of that, yes, the matches were accurate, but no one could play the game. So I understand why they made that change and why they added that soft cap. It was sort of a necessary evil, but it does, again, come from good intentions. Like I said, it's back to the cotton shirt analogy. They had good intentions here, but the unfortunate side effect is we have just such insane disparities of skill level that no two matches can ever be compared by the same metric. So again, you could have someone saying Survive with Friends is overpowered, and then you look at a match of Timmys that are playing their first game of Dead by Daylight together, and they're terrible, and they don't know what to do, and by that metric, Survive with Friends is not at all overpowered. But then you got a 4-man comp team that you encounter the next game in the same MMR, and they're impossible to beat. So again, you can have someone saying Survive with Friends is too...
I think the other problem with this, just as someone who has played in a pretty high level in a variety of games, including, you know, team-based shooters, Rocket League, fucking car soccer, and Dead by Daylight. Dead by Daylight is very hard to judge for skill level. And this is important, and the reason why I bring it up is not necessarily because there's no skill in Dead by Daylight. This is not what I'm getting on to before people start going on to that. Dead by Daylight's... Okay, hold on. Let's turn this around. In Rocket League, as soon as someone touches the ball, you can immediately tell whether, like, their skill level. If you yourself are a high enough level, you can immediately fucking see if they're good. Like, it is instinctual, the way they carry the ball on their car, the way they move, the way they do certain things. It is immediately obvious to people that, hey, this player is fucking built different, right? Same thing in Overwatch. If you notice someone's shot accuracy, their positioning, the actions that they're doing, the placement of certain things, the routing that they're taking, their overall positioning in certain points on the map and certain points of contention, you immediately know that this is a very good player. In Dead by Daylight, there's next to none of that until you are in chase. And the problem is, for killers that end chases fast, like, say, your Nurse, your Blight, your Spirit, you know, a bunch of other ones, for killers that do that, you don't get an opportunity to see the skill expression of a survivor, because the positioning just is not there. Like, you don't get to see that. You at a very high level you do, but mostly you don't. And so you have to go into every match, and as soon as you find someone, you automatically almost always have to assume that this is going to be the best player you've ever come across. Now, on the opposite side, for killers, survivors can see whether a killer is good extremely quickly. It is very obvious. Like, again, Nurse, Blight, Spirit, if they start getting tags on you almost instantly, then you know that they're a pretty good killer. And this is you know, probably a lot to do with the fact that there's just more expression in Killer than there is Survivor. And I think that also leads to more imbalance where, you know, you can't just readily tell that someone is good based off of their first chase, you know? It's just not how that works. And unfortunately, in Dead by Daylight, how it works is you generally only get around 2 chases these days.
Strong, someone's saying it's completely fine, and again, they're both correct, because you cannot possibly compare with such an insane disparity in skill level between each match. You can't compare match-to-match gameplay. It's just impossible. And again, it's just the disparity there. So if the matchmaking doesn't work, we can't have good balancing discussions because we don't even know the metric we're basing it off of. You have to have a baseline level to discuss balancing. You can't discuss balancing based off people that don't know what they're doing, because then everything is too strong or everything is too weak and vice versa. But you can't go against the absolute top level comp players because they literally play by a different set of rules entirely. So where do you even begin looking for this kind of thing? All the disparity here makes these discussions almost impossible, and it's a source of a lot of frustration and misery for a lot of people both playing and discussing the game. So those are the 3 main tenets that result in the game being miserable, but they all go to a central point. I don't know if you caught on, but there was something in every single one of these sections that I repeated, and it is the main core issue that they all kind of come from. The actual issue, main issue with Dead by Daylight is the match-to-match disparity in terms of the difficulty involved with that match. That is really the core issue why this game is just so miserable for so many people, because you have no idea what the hell you're gonna get. It's like if you played a round of Counter-Strike and sometimes you just spawned in with no money, and sometimes you spawn in with $30,000 to buy everything on round 1. There's no eco round. Everyone just starts with ops and shit.
Christ.
Like, that is sort of what Dead by Daylight is. That's why it's so incredibly frustrating, and it leads to this endless cycle. In a nutshell, this is the cycle. You can just play casually, having a good time, running whatever you want. Eventually, you're going to very quickly encounter a difficulty mismatch, whether it's because the map that you're on is too strong, the builds you're going against are too strong, the matchmaking didn't work. Any of these 3 core tenets can result in this scenario, but the end result is, for some reason, this is not an equally set match. Something is hugely imbalanced here for any one of these reasons. So you're going to encounter this. Again, doesn't matter what the reason is, but you'll encounter that. So then your rationality would be there. Well, the last thing I went against is unfair. I got a really bad map. I got a really strong team. They had really good perks. I was playing a really weak killer. The matchmaking was really bad. Whatever. The last thing I went against was unfair. So now next game, I'm going to bring something really stronger to mitigate those imbalances. I'm going to minimize the chance of the game screwing me over by bringing in something much, much stronger and going super, super hard in trying to win. But then the next game, it works in the opposite direction. There's a massive overkill due to encounter difficulty going in the other way. The map is really in your favor this time. Matchmaking was really in your favor. The survivor perks are not really good against the killer you brought. You're playing Plague and they all brought healing builds, for example. Whatever the variable is, this next game is vastly overkill and was way too easy. So then you go, okay, fine, that was ridiculous. Let's tone it back a bit. Then you go back to playing casually again. And then the cycle just repeats forever. So you can...
I agree with this point. I agree with this whole circular thing. But and again, this is just OCE. And I feel like in OCE it works a bit different because I also feel like OCE is just overall a less competitive nation when it comes to, also not nation, but like area, zone, if you will, when it comes to Dead by Daylight. There are sort of unspoken rules, I want to say, almost, and again, if this exists elsewhere, please let me know in the comments, but there is like a unspoken rule that in the, I want to say, if my time, New Zealand time, if you go between the hours of, say, 5 o'clock and maybe 11 or 12 o'clock at night, right? Almost all of the games you're going to have are going to be relatively friendly. There's not going to be really anyone who hard goes at it just at all. And I mean, like, everyone kind of respects this rule. I don't know why, but I've never really, like, ran into any hard cases when it comes to these times. Outside of those times are where all the nerds decide to jump on and it just goes haywire. So, yeah. Again, that's just an OCE thing. But if that exists elsewhere, please let me know. That's all I'm going to be watching from the video today. I do agree with most of what Scott says. Again, very minor, like, things that I disagree with, but that's just because I think of the region I exist in. I know Europe is extremely competitive in Dead by Daylight. I know Eastern Europe also is. I also know that the Americas can get quite competitive as well. But it's in OCE. I think it's more so a bit more vibey, a bit less competitive, probably a little bit less competitively evolved as well. I think generally our player base is probably worse than the Europes of the world. So yeah. Anyways, that's about it. See ya.